Of the heads of Hamas, 2012, kill them all the Jews, don't leave a single one. Ismail Haniyeh, 2017, children are tools to be used against Israel, we'll sacrifice them for them. Yahya Sinwar, who planned the 7th, we will take down the border with Israel and tear their hearts out from their bodies.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I just stumbled across this clip of a heated debate between Douglas Murray and Natasha Hausdorff versus Mehdi Hasan and Gideon Levy on whether anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. And honestly, you'll see how Douglas absolutely dismantles the opposition's entire framework with pure facts and receipts. They try every deflection in the book, but he's not letting them dodge the actual substance. Make sure you watch until the end, because the way he forces them to confront Hamas's documented statements is absolutely devastating to their argument. Please comment down where you are watching from. It's great to see people from all over the world connecting in here. All right, now let's get into the video.
Our audience following this fantastic back and forth. Let's begin, and Douglas, let me come to you first, because I think it's certainly, no doubt, on many people's minds to address Gideon and Mehdi's point about what is legitimate in this debate in terms of the criticism of Zionism and what is illegitimate. Well, give us a sense of your parameters here, because they're making an argument that, you know, this is a debate. We are having a debate today, are we not? So is all of this off the table? What's on the table? Give us, calibrate for us your understanding of Zionism.
Let me just reiterate, because we started this debate with a definition put up behind us on the screens, and however much Mehdi and Gideon want to reframe it, it's quite straightforward. Zionism, I repeat, is the right of the Jewish people to self-determination in their historic homeland. Anti-Semitism is cruel double standards towards Jews and cruel and unfair treatment of them as Jews. When I wish I could say I'm amazed by what Gideon said, but I recently watched your interview on Al Jazeera where you said that when the interviewer said to you how many people in Israel agree with you, and you said you could fit them in a phone box. And that's true. That is absolutely true. You are as obscure a figure in Israeli society as it's possible to find. And I'll give you an example of why. Natasha just picked Mehdi up on an important lie. You could say it's just an elision or a mistake he made because he hadn't read the primary sources. But I cannot allow Gideon to get away with what he just said, which was an unbelievable lie. He said, Israel isn't a democracy. First of all, I don't know, maybe, have you ever been there?
Yes.
When?
A few years ago, not recently. I don't get awards from the president of Israel like you do, so I don't get to do softball interviews.
Well,
I didn't get invited into Gaza. Douglas,
let me finish my point.
But you went to Gaza, right? You said you went to Gaza. How come you went to Gaza when the world's media is not allowed into Gaza?
There's two reasons.
But they took you into Gaza.
Well, first of all, I'll explain, but let me pick up my point since you keep trying to derail me. There are two ways to go into Gaza. One is with the IDF, which is what I did and what most Western journalists have done. The other is to go in with Hamas. You could probably go in with Hamas. I can't. Secondly, so you see, if I was on stage tonight busily flying around the world to busily defame a democracy, I would spend a bit of time there, maybe. I would spend a bit of time there because everything you said about it, like Gideon, is totally untrue. And I'll just give one other thing. Gideon said an appalling thing just there, that this is not about annihilation. One of the heads of Hamas, 2012, kill them all the Jews, don't leave a single one. Ismail Haniyeh, 2017, children are tools to be used against Israel, we'll sacrifice them for them. Yahya Sinwar, who planned the 7th, we will take down the border with Israel and tear their hearts out from their bodies. I'll tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, from what I've seen, which you scorn because you are an armchair journalist. I'll tell you what I've seen. When Yahya Sinwar said that we want to rip the hearts out of the Jews, it wasn't rhetoric. They did it. They mean it, and only this side wants to pretend they don't, for whatever reasons a psychologist would have to explain.
Okay, so Douglas just demolished the entire framing of this debate, and I need you to understand why this matters. He starts by hammering home the actual definition. Zionism is the right of Jewish self-determination in their historic homeland. That's IIT. And watch how the opposition keeps trying to dodge this simple fact. But here's where it gets absolutely brutal. Douglas calls out Gideon Levy as someone who could fit his Israeli supporters in a phone box. That's not just an insult, that's a fact check. Gideon is literally marginalized in Israeli society because his views are so extreme. Why does that matter? Because he's being presented as some moral authority on Israel when Israelis themselves reject his perspective overwhelmingly. And then Douglas does something genius. He exposes how Mehdi got into Gaza. The contrast is stark. Douglas went in with the IDF like credentialed journalists do, while Mehdi had alternative access. The question of journalistic objectivity becomes central here. Who has the clearer lens when covering this conflict? Now, the crucial part, Douglas brings receipts. He references documented statements from leadership figures expressing intentions toward Jewish people. This isn't rhetoric he's inventing. These are quotes you can verify. And his point is devastating. When people explicitly state their intentions, maybe we should believe them. The opposition wants an abstract debate about ideologies, while Douglas is saying, look at the actual stated goals here. This is why I support Douglas's position. He's forcing everyone to confront documented evidence instead of theoretical arguments. You cannot have an honest conversation about Israel's security concerns without acknowledging what organizations like Hamas have explicitly stated as their objectives. The disconnect between what's being said in English for Western audiences versus what's said in Arabic is real and documented.
Sorry, you called me. Let me respond. Let's do this.
I want to see if all four of you can work with me to work through some of the questions that are on the mind of this audience who are going to have to vote on this resolution at the end of the evening. So, Mehdi, have a quick response, but then let's get focused back on this question of why do you think Zionism is a movement, an ism, like anti-Americanism or anti-Britishism or whatever it is? I want to hear more on that so this audience can make an informed choice at the end of the night.
Yes, but let me just deal with a few things that Douglas said, because there were a few things were said. I mean, it's amusing. I wasn't surprised at all. I came to a debate in Toronto to debate Israel with two defenders of the current government, and so far Gideon and I, correct me if I'm wrong, we could have done a long list of you're apologists for genocide and war crimes and crimes against humanity. We didn't do that, but we've been called liars and Hamas supporters, and I get it. Neither of us talked about Hamas. We don't support Hamas. This is not a debate about Hamas. I know Douglas wants to redefine it as a debate about Hamas. Great, good for him, because he can't actually deal with the arguments we're putting forward. All the Jews who are putting forward these arguments, they're all anti-Semites, remember. I just want to deal with one point very important here. Douglas is the great journalist in Israel. I love this. Cosplaying as a journalist, going into Gaza with the IDF. Douglas interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu in January. Douglas did not, you're very bothered by Qatar and funding Hamas.
They're your bosses.
But, well, we're talking about bosses, let's talk to this.
You're literally paid by them. I've interviewed Qatari officials. You can go on YouTube and watch my interviews with Qatari officials. And then you can watch Douglas interview Benjamin Netanyahu, where he asked him pearls like, is there another chapter left in the Netanyahu biography? That was the strong question for that. He didn't ask Benjamin Netanyahu, why did you work with Qatar to fund Hamas all those years? Why did you prop up Hamas all those years? Why, according to today's Israeli media, did you have reports that there was going to be an attack on your citizens and completely allow that to happen? Douglas didn't ask any of those questions. Instead, he'd like to spray around Hamas at the Muslim on the stage. Douglas referred to Hamza Yusuf, the First Minister of Scotland recently, as the First Minister of Gaza. Muslim guy, and he said, quote, you said, quote, he has infiltrated our system. Given we're at a debate about anti-Semitism, I find it ironic that you are throwing out some of the most bigoted dual loyalty tropes known to man, referring to a born British Muslim politician as the First Minister of Gaza. Since he's leveled that, I have to correct it. First of all, you obviously didn't see the whole interview with Netanyahu. You'd have seen the first question was one that no one else has asked him. But anyway.
Did you ask about his support for Qatar and hostages?
Gentlemen, we're going to read this.
Douglas, did you ask about
It's lovely to have the Douglas and Mehdi show, but we have two other presenters on this panel that our audience wants to hear from. Don't you, audience? Yes, thank you. So let me try again with this question. I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to come to you, Natasha. The other side brought it up in a different way. Where do the Palestinian people fit into this debate? Are they all anti-Semites because they oppose Zionism, the ideology, the movement, Israel's statehood? What's your answer to that question?
First, I think we have to acknowledge that the Palestinians have self-government. They have an autonomy. So when we're talking about, Quebec as an example, actually it's an important one so far. So it's an important one.
So Mehdi's response here is textbook deflection, and you need to see through it. Instead of addressing the documented statements Douglas cited, he immediately pivots to attacking Douglas personally. You interviewed Netanyahu with softball questions, you're biased. Okay, but where's the rebuttal to the actual evidence presented? Notice what Mehdi does not deny. He doesn't dispute the access route Douglas mentioned. He just tries to normalize it by listing other interviews he's done. But that doesn't address the fundamental question about objectivity and access. If your reporting depends on cooperation from certain parties, how does that affect your coverage? And then this accusation he throws at Douglas about the Humza Yusuf comment. Mehdi's trying to flip legitimate political criticism into something else entirely. That's the patterns. You can't question certain policy positions or statements without being accused of the worst possible motives. It shuts down actual debate. Here's what Mehdi still hasn't addressed: the substance. Douglas presented documented statements about intentions toward Jewish people. Mehdi's response? We're not here to talk about that organization. Wait, what? You're debating whether opposition to Israel crosses into anti-Semitism, and you don't want to examine the stated goals of Israel's primary adversary? Natasha makes the crucial point that gets lost. Palestinians do now have governing structures. The PA exists. Certain areas have had self-governance. What happened with that autonomy? What was built? And when she talks about the opposition being willing to perpetuate conflict rather than acknowledge these realities, that's the heart of it. Refusing to hold all parties accountable doesn't help anyone. The autonomy point matters because it challenges the narrative that Palestinians have zero agency or political representation.
As far as Canada is concerned, well,
let's let Natasha finish. I'll come to you next.
There is an important Canadian Supreme Court case, read the secession of Quebec, which is so significant that it's said to be part now of customary international law, which deals with the question of self-determination. And it's clear that that has to take into account the territorial integrity of other states. Now, the ability of the Palestinians to self-determine in the West Bank and actually vote for their leadership in the Palestinian autonomy, and certainly after the last 16 years of Hamas building a terror infrastructure, we can see what they've done with self-governance there, but that exists. I think they have been desperately let down by their leadership, and when it comes to the question of anti-Zionism, what's desperately tragic about this debate, and what we've heard already so far, is that the opposition seem willing to fight to the last drop of Palestinian blood in order to make the case against Israel. And it's not just Israelis that are suffering as a result of that, but it's also ordinary Palestinians. If the opposition actually cared about the Palestinians, they would not be seeking to conflate Israeli Arabs and Palestinians in the way that I described earlier. They would stop propagating these falsehoods about the situation, and they would stop blaming Israel for the tragic deaths that we're seeing, because ultimately, as Douglas was describing earlier, this is the responsibility of Hamas, no one else. There's one very brief point.
One very brief point, then Gideon's going to come in.
Yes, we've heard already this utopia of a one-state solution being advanced by the other side, in contrast to the autonomy that I have described. And we saw the reality of that for anyone who was blind to the realities here on the 7th of October. This was not a surprise to anyone that listened to the Hamas leadership and listened to what is being said in the rest of the Arab world. When we're talking about the mutilation and the terrible atrocities that were committed on the 7th of October, we need to understand the history that led up to that. Even in 2002, in the lynching in Ramallah, that very famous image of two Israelis who had wandered, gotten lost. They came to the Ramallah police station in order to seek refuge there. They were lynched, and their livers were eaten by the mob that lynched them. The photograph I refer to is the individual who held up his bloody hands into the window, and the baying crowd below went wild for that sight. That was exactly what we saw on the 7th of October, but in 2002 in Ramallah. These are Palestinians who have been educated for generations to believe that the highest calling in life is to slaughter Jews. And they are being let down by that education system that is internationally supported. UNRWA schools educated 3/4 of the terrorists that crossed the border on the 7th of October. 3,000 people don't just wake up one morning and decide that it's a good day to slaughter Jews. That takes time and effort and energy and indoctrination.
Let's go to Gideon, and then Mehdi, you'll have a quick reply.
In the last 35 years, I'm covering the Israeli occupation. There's not a single week that I don't go to Gaza or to the West Bank. Unfortunately, the last 17 years, I can't go to Gaza because the Israeli government does not let any Israeli journalist into Gaza. But I've seen a little bit of the Israeli occupation. Not as much as Natasha and Douglas saw, but still I saw something. To speak today about autonomy in the West Bank, really it insults propaganda. It insults any human being who just knows the reality on the ground. Autonomy in the West Bank? I mean, did you ever hear a worse joke than this? Do you know what does it mean to live under the Israeli occupation? Do you know what does it mean to wake up in the morning or to go to sleep at night with troops coming into your home, with kidnapped children, women? I don't have to get into it because you in Canada see much more than we in Israel because we are protected by our media who doesn't show us anything. I just want to say to Douglas, I'm very proud to be a single voice. You know why? Because messes in history made the biggest mistakes. From when is it a criteria if you gain a majority? I'm not a politician. You want to look like messes in history who went blindly after horrible ideologies and horrible leaders? Do you need examples from this? And those few dissidents, they are the heroes of today, not me. But those dissidents are the heroes that we admire and should admire. So from when is the fact that I am lonely as a guarantee for anything? You can go with the masses. Have a nice time with the masses. I don't want to be with them.
Natasha makes a point here that's uncomfortable but necessary. The one-state solution the opposition promotes has a real-world test case. What happened when barriers came down? Recent events showed us. This wasn't spontaneous. It was organized, systematic, planned. Her reference to historical incidents from 2002 connects a pattern. She's arguing this isn't new. It's part of a documented history of celebration around violence against Israeli civilians. And her core argument, large numbers of people don't spontaneously coordinate without prior preparation and ideological framework. That requires education, training, indoctrination over time. When she discusses UNWA schools, she's citing documented facts about curriculum content and the backgrounds of those who participated in recent events. This isn't about generalizing entire populations. It's about examining what educational systems teach and what outcomes they produce. Palestinian Media Watch has extensive documentation of textbook content that glorifies violence. The question she's raising is legitimate. If you want to understand why violence happens, you have to examine the systems that prepare people for it. That's not demonization. That's root cause analysis. Then Gideon comes in with his, "I'm proud to be a single voice" defense, and honestly, this is where emotion overtakes logic. Yes, dissidents can be heroes. They can also just be wrong. Being in the minority doesn't automatically make you morally correct. Galileo was right, but flat earthers are also minorities. His point about security measures and their impact on Palestinian daily life. These are real issues worth discussing, but he frames it entirely one-sided, as if these measures exist in a vacuum rather than as responses to decades of security threats. After multiple intifadas and constant attacks, you cannot pretend Israel's security concerns are manufactured. The tragedy is Gideon's extensive experience covering the situation, but his analysis only examines one dimension while giving other actors complete passes on their stated intentions and actions. So what do you think of this? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.